So with that ideas and those ideas in mind, we can now move into our Dinacharya and how to do some more specific protocols and antidotes. A lot of emphasis has been given to this morning routine in Ayurveda, as once again, this is really how we begin our day, and it really sets up what's going to follow for the rest of our days. So there's an old dictum that something well started is a job pretty much half done. Such notions will run throughout Jyotish as well. Where a single moment in the beginning of any event, whether it be birth of a business or birth of a human being, can tell us what is going to unfold for that specific event. And if our powers of perception are strong enough, we can see how this plays out. So that idea is there. It's at play here as well. And as you work with this knowledge, you really get to see it in play and how much of a difference it can make. So essentially, many of the practices in Dinacharya help to rid the body and the mind of kind of the heaviness and the kapha and the kind of inertia, the tamasic quality that our nighttime sleep has had. It helps us to alert the senses, and it makes the body more sensitive to itself, really, as well as, which is going to help us respond to the environment around us, and it's going to set us up to make more healthy choices for the rest of the day. And as we do this on a daily basis, which is once again the groundwork, ground level, as you do this as a consistent habitual pattern, that helps ground vata, ground our routines, and this is going to carry over into our health over a lifetime. So it really starts, today in the morning. Health isn't in the future, and it's not by doing some drastic dietary regimes or anything, but it starts when you wake up. While a lot of this may be simple, there's really a deep logic behind all this, and this is going to help your health improve without any costly or extreme measures or fads or anything like that. And once again, over time, it's going to really breed that sensitivity to listen to your body and teach you as you go more into the subtleties of energetics over time, and hopefully with more guidance from proper teachers of these subjects. And there's an endless amount of subtlety with anything we might do, which we'll get into some of the subtle energetics later when we get into cooking and things like that. But just there's a lot there to unpack. So this is where it all starts. So once again, to this end, the scriptures recommend waking up at the Brahma Muhurta. And as I mentioned before, it can range from 3 hours to 90 minutes before sunrise on any given day. A lot of people groan when they hear this. However, much like starting the day is important, however, to get up properly, we also have to consider sleep, which will largely determine our ability to wake up and fresh at this time. So if you're working and having a hard time waking up at this time and trying to force yourself, you got to start to pay attention as well to how you go to sleep at night as well, because whatever patterns are at play when you go to sleep is going to carry with you into your sleep. There's a big difference between relaxation and sleep. Just because you go to sleep, that doesn't mean you're relaxed necessarily. You can actually carry over stress patterns within the body and the mind into your sleep, so that your sleep actually isn't that restful. So it's important that the more we can learn to calm our body, to calm our nervous system, and to calm our mind down before we sleep, the more deeply we're going to be able to relax. And the more we can relax, the more our bodies can rejuvenate in sleep. And thereby it'll make this kind of morning routine that much easier to set up. And apart from that as well, people often too confuse some form of relaxation or asana or restoratives with meditation, but meditation itself is a whole nother ballgame, because meditation, it gets into subtle spaces and places outside of the body so much. So don't confuse that either with restoratives and that form of yoga, which is definitely useful. Now there's many ins and outs to this process of restorative yoga and whatnot, which we're going to recover in depth later on to get you grounded in those practices, because a lot of people overdo asana, overdo everything these days, that it's better to just take a 20-30 minute shavasana as your practice than what's taught largely out there in a lot of yoga studios, which will get you in touch with something a little deeper and actually restore your health, as opposed to having one more thing to push your body and your mind and your ego in some kind of, supposed direction towards transformation. But anyways, it's a large topic, but we'll look at that later. But for now, one of the best and most simple things you can do, again, is set up that Shavasana practice. It's ideal. You want to try to hold and build up to at least 15 to 20 minutes a day in order to properly relax the body. It takes at least about 15 minutes for people who don't have experience with relaxation to actually move away from that flight or fight syndrome. People who are a little more experienced in relaxation can move into the body a little quicker than this, but it does take some time, and it actually takes practice to relax. Just by laying down doesn't mean you relax if you're not bringing any awareness to the body, because we all hold really chronic tension patterns within our body that won't go away without either somebody working on us, or more importantly, us starting to pay attention to our body and working on ourselves, which takes time, and it takes time to learn to listen to the body properly and get proper useful information signals from that. So but it's something we have access to if you pay attention, work with it over time, and have some guides along the way. You can see we have a basic Shavasana video for the setup. There's a few things that can be added to the basic Shavasana. You can add elevated support, as an angled support, as we showed in the Supta Virasana video. If you are a little more tired, having a slight upright nature will help you stay awake in Shavasana, so you can be a little more alert to the body and that relaxation response. Likewise, you can support the ankles, so you can put your legs over the bolster, which is really relaxing when the joints are actually bent, helps the body to relax within Shavasana a little more readily. But you can also support the ankles under the Achilles tendons, along with that bolster under the knees, and have the head just slightly dip down towards the chest. You can play with that. It can help the relaxation response a little more. Most importantly, however, is keeping covered with a loose-fitting blanket. Warmth is really essential there, without which you're not going to relax. So, a practice like this, those little tweaks to that Shavasana can really help to set up the relaxation response. And a practice like this before bed is essential. Something of this nature, even if it's just reviewing the day, which the Ayurvedic scriptures recommend as well, just to start to let go of the day, let go of what happened, not carry it with you into sleep, so that you can have adequate, proper rest. There's a lot more to this, but if you are going to start this practice, feel free to get in touch with any questions or concerns that come up. I'll see what I can answer, but I really can't emphasize this enough. And to let go, if you do have a busy asana practice or any other kind of busy lifestyle habit, spend a little more time in something quiet like this, and resting your system will do you a lot more good. All this is depending on you hard, but generally most people I say see Shavasana with awareness is not going to hurt them. And this will also help you to move into a meditation practice a lot more readily, which is the real practice of yoga. And the higher limbs of yoga is really meditation, which everything else before it is just a prelude, is just an introduction to that meditation practice. So something to keep in mind. Now, many practitioners also like to recommend a more or less sleep depending on your dosha type. And once again, and as I emphasized elsewhere, in general, you don't tend to do a lot of things for your dosha type past balancing for seasonal adjustments. And if you do have stronger imbalance, only then would you start adjusting your routines, which we'll cover later once we have some groundwork in place and you've been doing some simple principles like this. But oftentimes, simple things like this can clear out other more deep-rooted imbalances, because these are more of the fundamental, the groundwork. So this is where it's really cutting to the root of what's going on, if done in a disciplined fashion. which is really the exception rather than the rule, sadly enough, these days. So nonetheless, waking up at Brahma Muhurta, important, but getting into that sleep pattern is really important. And just one more thing, just to stress Brahma Muhurta, it's also a very interesting time because, we see Brahma linked to it, and Brahma is really, the creator of the universe and that creative energy, so to speak. So if we are trying to retune and rewire our system and our habits and, those habitual thought patterns, this time is great for kind of going back to the womb, back to a time of creation, so to speak, on a subtle level in a daily fashion. And you will notice if you do this and wake up at this time, things start to resolve of themselves. New ideas, new avenues start to open up for ways to either fix problems or let go of things that aren't unhealthy for you. And it really does allow that creative spark to get out of whatever we may have come across in our life, months, days, years before this present moment. So it's another reason for that it's a unique time. It's kind of that, microcosmic Brahma energy coming through at that time. So something to really, really appreciate and respect. And also with the more spiritual practices, you're doing your practices and you're preparing for that rising of the sun who is, the giver of all our resources and our life on earth as we know it. You're waiting for that direct moment of the sun rising to greet him properly, and hopefully you've done all your prayers, your mantras, you're sitting in meditation, and so it's has an added auspicious effect there as well. So a lot there, but I hope I've stressed it enough. Just something to focus on. Now, when you do wake up, many traditions suggest different prayers to say. So it's kind of up to you what you want to do before this. There are some nice, Vedic peace mantras that you can do. Maybe I'll make a short video with one of them. But, there's many different ones and different, if you do have a tradition, do that. If not, you can make up your own prayer or just something to kind of set your mental place for the day. And once you do this, you want to check out which nostril is dominant. And this has to do with the knowledge of the swara, which we'll cover a little more in later lecture as well, and which we've covered elsewhere too. But in a nutshell, for those who aren't familiar, this is one of your nostrils will dominate at various times throughout the day. So to check this, you just want to hold a finger under your right and then left nostril, and you can see which airflow is stronger that's coming out of which nostril. And you want to take whichever nostril is stronger and place that foot and down onto the earth first before waking up. And this will get you literally, started off on the right foot energetically to start your day. And this, may have led to the quote, how some people have gotten out on the wrong side of the bed in the morning. Maybe they just put down the wrong foot, so to speak. So while it's not going to change your life, it may make things, a bit smoother and just get your natural body in sync with, more natural rhythms and energetic structures. And once again, we'll cover this more in depth later, but that's just a basic starting point. Now, once you're up, it's really recommended and ideal that you have a bowel movement and release whatever your body has been processing and or digesting over the course of the night. This should happen shortly after waking, and if not, it's really a sign that there's some kind of disturbance happening within your lifestyle patterns or within your digestive system, which may, it will take some time to work with, especially if you're new to this way of life. So don't, freak out, but it is a sign that something's off with the system. Now, one way to kind of get it moving, some people recommend to drink some water that has been boiled. You can, to do it really strong, purifying reduction, you can take a pot of water and reduce it from 1 to 1/4, You can either take some of this before bed to help start that process and flush out the system. Likewise, in the morning, some warm water like that can help. And you don't want to make it very hot. You have to really watch the temperature of problems, which can also, too hot of a liquid can create problems because the body really doesn't have any cool down mechanism. So you want to be careful with that. It's don't make your teas and your coffees and even your warm whatever digestive things too warm. It can really mess up the system. So even if you don't do this, it's still good to go and sit on the toilet for at least a few minutes, even if you don't have to go. This itself is going to encourage that downward flow of the energy, that apana vayu, to move in the right direction. And over time, it's going to really encourage that more regular and processed body habits that are in line with these, healthy natural urges. This release of fecal matter, once it's released, can really help the energy to start to flow up, which is really essential to igniting the digestive fire and getting the system moving in the later, asana pranayama practices. And in fact, many teachers actually recommend to not practice asana or things like closed meditation in the morning if you have not had a bowel movement or if your body is still processing anything, as this can really interfere with that upward moving energy. Or worse, it can drive ama deeper into your system because your system's clogged and now you're doing pretty strong energetic practices with it. So you have to be careful with that, and this pertains as well to any asana class or something you're taking. During the day, it's not enough to just not eat an hour or two before class. Ideally, many hours, and ideally as well, your system's moving. So you're not compromising your system because some of those routines can be pretty strong on the system. So better to focus on your Ayurveda and get your daily practices in line before you go doing anything crazy with the asana. Really. It's also up to you to use your own discretion, on this matter, and hopefully you do have some kind of teacher to advise you more specifically, but these are the general ideas that have been taught and handed down. Now, another aspect to going to the toilet is the fact that most modern toilets are not designed with proper human anatomy in mind. So it's most ideal that you squat when going to the bathroom, which is seen in many Asian cultures, and many toilets are built for this. So even if you don't have a toilet that's designed to squat on, you don't really have to invest in one of these newfangled kind of potty stools, some of which actually mimic incorrect sitting postures, but you can just stand on top of your pre-existing toilet and squat there. It's not really that difficult. This method of sitting allows the rectum to fully extend in a natural fashion, and it can also help with that movement of the apana vayu down, which is also, the squatting can be used as a yogic posture as well to aid in this process. And with some practice and some breath awareness too, which, the more you do this stuff, the more you'll get into that subtle energetics, which you can actually feel, and it's not that difficult with a little practice in this region. Going to the bathroom, if you do touch in with that area through your practices, you really see how beneficial this is to your system. And it just makes going to the bathroom so much more efficient, so much more healthy, quicker most of the time as well. So if you're not doing this, and if you think it's strange, especially at first, it might feel a little different, I just urge you to do some practices with it and try it for a little while to see how much it can help. I find it, it's just really hard to go back once you really start to feel and recognize the benefit of this. And those of you with mobility issues, once again, you might need to work with some asanas to, open up the lumbar and the pelvic and the sacral areas to achieve this position. But it's really well worth it to have this area open, and it's necessary to have this area open to any hatha yoga practice, because all the nadis come up to that seat of power there near the navel. And so you need that area to properly draw the energy up and distribute it throughout the body evenly. So before you even get into asana, kind of check that area and get that in line too as well if you're going to do something in tandem with asana. Now, after you're done going to the bathroom, it's kind of time to see what your feces are doing. Just a good habit to get into in general. And there's a range of diagnostics on this, which we've covered before. So you should be familiar with some of the basics about looking at what your stool is doing. But ideally, the fecal matter, it shouldn't be messy. It shouldn't really necessitate a lot of toilet paper. It should be a nice kind of round banana brown log. Pretty, once again, basic Ayurvedic information. But you shouldn't be having any of these little kind of rabbit turd pellets or any multiple chunks coming out at different times and all this. It should just be a nice solid piece of fecal matter. And when you go to wipe too, instead of wiping with toilet paper, it's really better to wash the anal orifice, which one can do easily by purchasing a bidet, which are pretty cheap, and it not only cuts back on waste, but also the tissue paper creates a lot of irritation. Your anal orifice has a lot of sensitive mucosal lining and passages that can get irritated or even harmed with excessive wiping over the years. It's really not a natural thing. Obviously, if your system is out of balance, you do have variations in fecal matter. Some toilet paper may be essential, but this is one of the more reasons that you want to learn to start to regulate your diet and understand this knowledge for really day-to-day as well as long-term colon health there. Now, there's also other purificatory rituals done on a more subtle level, which we can purify the body, but we're not going to cover it here much. But they are often done in traditional circles, and they can have a really strong impact if you're working with subtle energy in a more legitimate manner, but kind of beyond the scope of ours. But there's no end of level to subtlety with how some of this stuff goes. Once you've gone to the bathroom or attempted to go to the bathroom, you can start to brush your teeth. While the ancient texts recommend using a branch from various trees, most people these days use tooth powders, and the texts actually say that people suffering from issues like indigestion, ulcerations, fevers, cough, disease of the head and heart, ears and eyes should not use a toothbrush or a twig, but instead they also suggest the use of tooth powders that are predominantly bitter, astringent, and pungent in taste. So this really opposes how many toothpastes are often sweet, or they're trying to make them flavorful or not offensive to the mouth, but normally that sweet taste really increases according to Ayurveda, the water and the earth elements in the mouth, which is associated with this sweet taste. And that really creates a breeding ground for bacteria and various dental problems. So tastes such as bitter and astringent can really help to clean the mouth, can help to tighten the gums. And in fact, modern dentists will actually often recognize the efficacy of such products as well. While products such as Tom's of Maine, or even some of these kind of newfangled kind of quote-unquote healthy brands of toothpaste can actually create health problems, and not only just based on the sweet functions, but especially Tom's of Maine, I've heard, have harsh ingredients that are on the teeth and can actually strip the enamel quite often. So there's a wide variety of products on that end, but I really recommend you to consult with a dentist who is at least sympathetic to natural alternatives, or an Ayurvedic physician for your own personal needs. And then after this, you can also do tongue scraping, which is just kind of a common practice even outside of Ayurvedic circles these days, with some form of a tongue scraper, which you can pick up at any kind of store, Walgreens, whatever, food store, health food store. This also can help stimulate digestion some, as well as clean the mouth of bacteria on the tongue. And this practice also, it doesn't really remove ama from the system. It's not going to clear your whole system of ama, as a lot of people claim. It's really more about just cleansing the oral activity. It helps to wake up the tongue, really get it clear, so that sense of taste is sensitive to what you're eating, which will help help trigger the rest of the body in the eating process, and other things, but it's more limited to the oral cavity. So once this is done now, and also when you brush your teeth, the texts actually recommend like to start brushing from the bottom teeth and then move up to the top teeth. And then, once you scrape the mouth and all that, then you can take some sesame oil, and we're going to start working up here towards the eyes. You could take this and just put a small dab of warm sesame oil and rub it over your face. Now, you can use, to warm it up, you can either, just have a cup with, and get some really hot water from the sink to warm up the oil, or like a simple cup warmer or something, but it doesn't have to be burning hot, but some warmed oil is good. And oil massage is really big in Ayurveda, as it helps to keep skin smooth, strong, and really wards off drying or vata diseases, of which the skin is really readily prone to over time for everybody across the board. So it's just a good general practice, and we're not using a lot of oil here, but if you do use it, make sure you only use cold pressed. You want organic, unrefined sesame oil, and ideally that wherever you get the oil, the bottle should have a dark coating, so that the sunlight can't penetrate it, as it's a very sensitive substance. And you also want to cure the oil once you have it, so to help with rancidity issues. And it's really important to note here that sesame oil is really the only generally recommended oil used in Ayurveda across the types, unless it's something that has specifically been recommended by a physician. Sesame oil is your only real safe bet. And even then, for different ailments, everything does get tailored to the individual, but if you are working with this for self-health and are generally healthy, sesame oil is the one to go with. Lots of things are being thrown out there these days for using this for that dosha, or this for that, or coconut oil for oil pulling, lots of different things. However, per Ayurveda and the qualities of different substances and different constitutions, different times of years, a lot of factors to be taken into. Such things shouldn't just really be picked up out of nowhere. I know a lot of this stuff does seem really natural. It seems safe, but it's really not necessarily. Anything you're doing to your body, especially habitual things, can create issues over the long run. So, and even with sesame, watch out for the season, and even just watch out if some people may have reactions, especially if you're getting sesame oil that's not that good of quality. Some things may come up, so you do have to watch it's still there. Now, once you've done this and just taken a light dab of the oil over the head, you can just take a warmed towel or washcloth with some warmed water, clean off your face, which will help open the pores and once again continue waking up the senses as we move up to the eyes. And from here, you can just rub the eyes from the medial eye, both on the topper and the upper eyes, for a minute or so, and going along the bones. And the eyes are really a key sense. It's how we really take in the world and take in so much information. And this one act is just amazing to really start to wake you up. And even if you don't do all the other steps, this one is a good thing to do consciously with awareness, and it also kind of activates some marma points in that area. And I don't want to overwhelm you with information, which we already are, but it's it's just a good soft practice to do for a minute or so here. The texts also recommend a eye salve to put on, called kajal, which is another substance that can be applied here, but we're keeping it simple for now with the rubbing and helping to wake up the kapha and getting the senses up. But if you are using any kind of products or substances, oftentimes it's ideal to either make your own or find the purest thing you can, and really just watch out for any substances you can with any kind of additives or strange kind of processings done to them. So many things pop in and out, and even things that are claiming to be Ayurvedic medicines out there these days. or just there's so much. It's a very big business and becoming more and more popular as we move along. So get the purest stuff you can. Watch out for anything that's just selling products endlessly, and use it with caution. You only really need a few simple things, honestly, to get you up and started through the day, for the most part, unless, of course, you're dealing with deeper imbalances. So once you do that, now you can take just a small dab, like literally a couple drops of oil for the nose, for the ears. You can use your pinky or your pointer finger to just get some oil nice in the ears and around the nose to wake up those senses as well. Ward off, once again, any vata issues, especially in the ears, tend to come up. You don't want to be pouring drops and drops of nasya down your nose or in your ear, karnapurna, which are those are really medical procedures that are done during panchakarma treatments or as prescribed by a physician. So you want to take it light on the oil usage if you don't know what you're doing. And then after that, you can switch just a small cupful of water or a little capful of the sesame oil in the mouth for a couple of minutes. And then if you're using oil, spit it out in the trash. It will clog your drains. Even a little bit of oil over time will clog your drains, so make sure not to spit it there, but just a little bit. Once again, I said a capful. We have to talk about that practice of oil pulling here, because this practice is seen in the ancient shastras of Ayurveda, in the ancient texts. However, it has very, very little to do with what's being talked about these days. And it's really not how the practice has been done over time. So first of all, there's actually two forms of doing oil in the mouth. And one of these is called gandusha, and the other is kavalagraha. Now, gandush is where you hold a lot of oil in the mouth, while this kavalagraha is a basic rinsing or swishing, oil swishing in the mouth. Now, many different substances are used for both these processes that can be used, and this includes ghee. There are different oils that are used, milk. There's decoctions, gruel, and once again, even plain water can be used for this process. Even plain water has a neutralizing effect to the mouth, to the pH balance in the mouth, and is a good general swish too, like after you eat, just to neutralize any effects of the food. As mentioned before, though, sesame oil is the only generally oil used without deeper considerations of constitutions, and for our purposes here, once again, only a small amount if you're going to bother doing the swooshing. And even then, you still want to watch out for any issues. The sesame oil does have a slightly heating quality to it. It's not going to just kick up your pitta, but it is something that, watch out for over time. But once again, it is the generally recommended oil for these practices. The basic uses of these techniques are, once again, what they're promising is blown out of proportion for what's being sold on the market today. Even the more intensive gandusha therapy, it doesn't really detoxify your body, at least not what classical Ayurveda has used this theory for. I don't know what the modern researchers, quote unquote, are saying, but how Ayurveda would work this therapy, and seeing that this is where the therapy has come from over thousands of years of practice, I'm going to go with how they use it, and I'm not going to abuse that knowledge, and I would suggest you don't as well. But really, the therapy was it was more located towards the oral cavity, said to help with things such as loss of appetite, lack of taste in the mouth. Sesame oil and some things can have some antibacterial qualities. It can help with excess salivation, and different other issues of the oral cavity. But once again, depending on the substances used, are going to be treating different things. But it really shows more localized effects than clearing out your liver, curing cancer, whatever else they're saying about it these days. So once again, different remedies, different effects, and it should be prescribed. Particularly, like an oil like coconut, which is being thrown out there left and right these days. It's a pretty heavy and a cooling oil, and so those effects are not proper for everybody's mouth, nor are they proper, for every season or condition. So it needs to be used on a case by case basis. And that really comes down to the heart of what Ayurveda is, about specific qualities for specific individuals, not a general, blanket usage so much. Some texts and practices also recommend after this chewing of various substances at this point, such as beta leaves or sesame seeds, which is an option. But once again, for simplicity's sake, we're not going to get too far into a lot of these routines. And once again, also there's other tweaks based on even what I've given here, based on seasons and personal conditions, that one might tweak the rhythm of this routine, but we'll leave that later for more specific looks. But generally, a lot of this stuff is done under practitioners, and something to kind of keep in the back of your head. But what I've given so far is pretty safe, pretty basic, but even those basic few simple things will make a huge world of difference if you can do them with some discipline and awareness. So now, once this is all done, you can move on to your asana, pranayama, meditation practice, depending on what has been given to you by your guru or your teacher. And once again, depending on the nature of your path or its practices, shower may become, before you do asana, pranayama, meditation, or it may come after, asana, pranayama, and this and that. So the key point here is, when you do shower or bathe at any point, is to be careful not to put very hot water on your head. It's said that this can cause a loss of strength of the hair and the eyes. And in fact, bath is said to be contraindicated for those suffering from things like facial paralysis, diseases of the eyes, mouth, and ears, even diarrhea, flatulence, indigestion, people who have just eaten. All these things are actually contraindicated for a nice hot shower or bath. And once again, even if you don't have much time to do, the later portions, such as the asana, the pranayama, the meditation, which can take a lot of time. So everything else I gave you before stepping into that routine shouldn't take more than 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes at most. So there, you can get a lot in a short amount of time. But if you don't have a lot of time to do all this, it's really good to do at least a little bit, just to start to get that pattern in place, to get that healthy pattern and healthy routine in place. And then over time, as you see the effects, and as it affects the rest of your life as well, you're going to see that opening up more and more into your life. It is important to note that if you do an asana practice, exercise is always done to only half capacity in Ayurveda. It's not Western exercise theory. You don't want to push yourself or exert your body past what it's capable of, because then you're starting to imbalance the doshas. Especially vata gets out of balance when that happens. The tissues are depleting. It's just not a healthy regime in the long term, according to Ayurveda. Yes, you can do it and create an illusion of health, but after time, such excessive regimes, they have an effect on the body, and you don't see them until much later in the life. So the rule, according to Ayurveda, is you do a practice, any exercise, whether it's asana or anything else you're doing, up until the point of where you're breaking a sweat, and then you stop and you don't go any further. So this usually means also only in the winter, when the body is strongest, would you bother pushing yourself even to half capacity. In the summer, when your body is really, really weak due to the intense heat, the body is the weakest, and exercise is often even completely discarded in favor of quieter activity. So during the summer, you may even want to just quit going to your exercise, going to your gym or your workout asana class, or whatever you're doing, and try to stick with more restorative forms of yoga. Focus on your meditation practices, your quieter things, maybe a light walk, in the early evening when it's a little cooler out. Things like that. It's a much better a time during that day. So a lot there as well. But those are the general protocols for Ayurveda around the exercise regime. The Ashtanga Samgraha, ancient text of Ayurveda, also mentions that those with vata or pitta diseases should not do exercise at all either. So that comprises a large part of the modern yoga. If people actually took this knowledge seriously, a lot of people with vata and pitta heavy in their constitution and or disease imbalances tend to be the ones who are drawn to modern yoga or heavy exercise routines, because they push themselves and is exactly what they need to not do to balance themselves again, which is really hard for most people. But this, once again, this knowledge exists for a reason, and it has a deep logic to it once you start seeing it at play. Along with this exercise as well, it's recommended that things such as talking too much, staying awake at night, walking long distances, excessive sexual intercourse, laughter, and other forms of exertion in excess, apart from exercise. There's a nice quote in the scripture: "This will destroy the body like a lion who fights an elephant and dies after winning." He dies after winning because he's so exhausted from pushing himself so much. And so, this is a really poignant quote and something to reflect on. So even if you, have a lot of strength, you have a good body, and you can do all these things without, seemingly bothering yourself, you may do it, but at the end of that race, at the end of that marathon, or at the end of whatever you're doing, your body can kick out. So, watch that out. I saw a lot of this in so many different ways. When I used to live in San Francisco, all this stuff was, everything that was on this list is there in strides in various communities, not every community, but especially, the more health type of oriented communities. And it's kind of distressing to see, people doing things that are really unhealthy. But then the bigger problem is when you mention anything, people don't want to hear it, especially the more out of balance you become. Oftentimes, the more defensive you can become of your habits without looking into it. And then oftentimes, people will find different philosophies or different modern approaches to health that kind of agree with whatever they want to believe, or, it gives them something to latch onto without, trying to cut to the root of nature and, how the body functions at a natural, healthy, sane level. So not here to convert anybody, but, just some things to think about and reflect on. And then after all this is done, you can do some light massage on the system, kind of kneading massage to help compact the tissues. But once again, more than I want to get into here, which we can cover later when we actually cover yoga and things of that nature. So, you can do whatever is given to you by your teachers at this point. Now, once all the above is done, we can finally start on breakfast. However, if you've not had a bowel movement, then you've likely not processed your food from the previous day, and you might want to wait until this occurs before you start eating again. Oftentimes when people wake up past sunrise, it's really a time, once again, as I mentioned before, of the heavier kapha elements. It's harder to evacuate. And so the digestive fire and capacity hasn't really ignited enough to eat a proper breakfast. And then, if you throw more food on top of that, then you're just compromising your agni and your ability to digest food later in the day as well. However, many of us really eat out of habit quite often, and we continuously disturb our agni and keep compromising its function before we've really processed our previous meals. And, this is a chronic thing. Many of us are not even aware of how backed up and how stagnant we really are in our navel center. And it can take literally years to clear that area when you start to bring attention to it and wake it up. And, this doesn't mean that you're having a bowel movement with coffee or, taking heavy doses of triphala or castor oil or something. You should be able to have a more or less natural bowel movement. And some of those things can help to get the system up to par and, scrape some of the tissues, no doubt. But, in general, the system should be able to process things efficiently. So if this is the case where, you haven't had a movement, check in if you really need any more food. And it's okay to skip breakfast, or once again, sip on some warm water, or just eat something very light, or maybe some spiced milk with ghee, depending on the season, of course, to help with things getting moving if you really have, a dire need to have something, because you don't want to deprive those natural rhythms, those natural patterns that you've set up for yourself, which in itself can disturb the body. So, you have to ease into this kind of living slowly. Never, if your mind's not agreeing with it as well, then, it's not going to help in the long term to get a steady, stable pattern. But, the more you work with this over time, the more you're going to reset the system some. And, coffee, once again, just to bring it back, because that's really, a lot of people use that to start their day and to clear the system. But, if you're drinking coffee and then you have a bowel movement, that's a sure sign that you've become dependent on that. To clear that. And if you work with these principles and try to get off coffee and that reliance on it, you'll see that your energy patterns may, depending on who you are, but in general, they can actually stabilize some without the coffee, and the bowel movement to come back to you normally. Now, once again, all this gets tempered per seasons, per different conditions, but this is, a good general protocol, good general idea. Those with a kapha imbalance may skip breakfast altogether quite often, actually, as advised by a physician. But in general, too, those with a vata or pitta imbalance, not a dosha type, but an imbalance in vata or pitta, they may actually require something a little heavier for breakfast to ground their energy, or if you do have a higher digestive fire, if your agni is a little higher. Then you may need, something more for it to work with, depending on the disease pathologies, and once again, as recommended by a physician. However, most people familiar with Ayurveda will know that the middle part of the day, once again, as I mentioned, is the strongest part of the day, and when we should eat our largest meal. And while dinner, once again, should be fairly light, so we don't compromise our system going into the evening, going into the sleep, and, overly burdening the body with things to process through the night when it needs to rest and restore itself. Along with this, too, another general dietary thing for a daily routine is only a small amount of water should be had with the meals, and this is primarily just to wash the food down. But any larger intake of water should be done at least 30 minutes or more before or after meals. So you don't want to do heavy water intake anywhere close to your meals, as this is going to dilute the hydrochloric acid and your digestive enzymes in the stomach while it's trying to digest the food, and really slow down that whole process, if not compromise it entirely. Huge and crucial. Likewise, snacking is generally not advised in Ayurveda, nor is eating, very, very small portions of food, as even, this process starts to gear up the body and does require some energy to digest. And if it's done habitually and throughout the day, it can really slow down and compromise the system. So try to curb that as much as possible. Some practitioners may recommend for some people to eat, 4 meals a day or this or that. I've seen this happen. So, this whole 3-meal thing can get adjusted quite often. But once again, you have to work with somebody about those details. And now, while all these things seem kind of insignificant, once again, or it seems simple or kind of almost common knowledge or common sense, or you may be wondering, well, that's not really medicine. It's really, in these daily eating habits and in Ayurveda, there's a lot more to all of this that we'll look at further later. But, for now, it's really adhering to these kind of basic and working with these practices. And I call them practices as opposed to rules, because they really are practices and, require attention and application until it becomes second nature. And, once the energetic paradigm and balance is set up, then you'll do that naturally, because you know how you're going to feel if you don't. But once you get some of this, it's good to get this in place before you start trying to tack on to too many things at once. Because if you do throw on too many things at once as well, you can start to confuse your body. You can compromise your system. So it's really good to just, take whatever few of these ideas I've given, take them one at a time, and work with them one at a time, and take the changes slowly and steadily to start to see how each one of these things has a certain nuance on your own constitution and at their own time of year, and work with it over time. And I'm sure you'll be pleased with what you find if you can get this in place. And also, you will also find many, many other things out there, especially in the world of Dinacharya. And, it just gets to be way, way too much. So it's why I've whittled down here some of the core fundamental basics taken straight from the text, as well as the ordering that's given in the text, which sets up, a kind of a pranic template, if you will, where a lot of people just start throwing in this and that and here and, any kind of which way order, which gets really confusing to work with. But if you follow this kind of template and how it's worked with, you'll find a natural rhythm occurring within them, and, something you can get behind and start flowing with. So just a side note on that. Now, while there's a lot of emphasis giving to this morning routine and specifics in the ancient texts, there's also many lifestyle protocols given within the Dinacharya chapters, as well as the ideals that one might live by in the text. And a lot of these things fall under what's called the Dharma Shastra, which is really the set of codes and the conducts for people and how they should live. And, some of these things can kind of vary here and there with different time periods. For example, they do recommend, dressing fashionably for your time period. You shouldn't try to be too out of step with the times or going against the grain for various reasons. But to this end, the Ayurvedic scripture is not the end-all, be-all with this type of knowledge specifically. But a lot of it is, in a nutshell, really just advising one to be kind and understanding to people, to speak well of others, things like avoiding confrontation, helping foes, and contributing to the world around you through, one of the aims of life, such as dharma, artha, kama, moksha, those 4 areas of life, and other aspects we've been covering within our course. So we've already covered some of this, like with the yamas, niyamas, and, it's all there, and there's many different approaches. But in general, it's having that dharmic attitude, trying to be a productive, useful, pleasant member of society as much as possible, and working with that will also help create health within your daily routines. But really a lot of emphasis given to things that you do when you wake up. But don't underestimate how you are carrying yourself in your day-to-day interactions, in your relationships with people, and what you're doing past the morning routine, past what you're doing alone at your house. If you can't carry that attitude and that awareness into the real world where reactions are happening, then you're really not, it's going to have an impact on you when you come home at night, and on your health as well. So, everything's affecting us. So we do have to look at our work environment and all these other things, and we'll look at some of that a little later. But for now, I just wanted to focus on the morning routine to at least get you on a setup, get you on a starting path to stabilizing yourself for the rest of the day. But some of these other things, some of the that are mentioned in the text include things like not gazing at the sun for a long time, carrying a heavy weight on your head, engaging in the brewing, selling, distributing, or receiving of wine for drinking. There's a lot of wine, they're called avashtas in the Ayurvedic text, but usually those are for medicinal purposes. Some people I find nowadays, because they see that wine is heavily mentioned in Ayurvedic texts, they feel that as a license to abuse it or use it, more than is necessary for whatever reason. And then, you have these yoga and wine retreats, which are just kind of absurd, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, so, and then another thing, sits on your heels for a long time. You want to avoid direct breeze, sunlight, and snow. So those are things you want to avoid. And then there's also things you want to do, such as having compassion for all living beings, granting of gifts, controlling the activities of your body, speech, and mind. You want to look at people as if they were your own, and just good moral conduct. And to close out with for the Dinacharya chapters, there's some thoughts here given from I believe this is from the Ashtanga Hridayam. It's he who constantly thinks of, reviews, examines how his day and night are passing, and adopts only the right way will never become a victim of sorrow. And, sorrow and grief is such a root cause of many disorders as well. So, just as we started moving into the Brahmi Muhurta by going with sleep, here we'll end with this concept of sleep. So whatever, once again, you've lived with throughout the day, it's good to review it, put things in place, reflect. What could you have done better? It's always good, instead of just pushing through the day without really taking stock in where you're at in this moment. So that these routines don't become so routine that you're not still becoming aware and sensitive to any changes that may be happening in your day-to-day life, which is really important. And once again, while these are simple, they're time-tested, they're based in, this deeper Ayurvedic paradigm, and it really pays to start paying attention to them. It's a baseline from an Ayurvedic standpoint, and really it's what the scriptures would recommend before any kind of, fancy therapies or crazy diet plans or, treating specific diseases. The texts usually start, pretty early on in a lot of the texts is this Dinacharya and the seasonal regimes, which we'll cover in a little bit. Because without that good foundation, our house is going to fall. You need that foundation. So that's all I have to say for this talk. I hope, once again, as always, it's been useful. And please, take some of these things to heart, and I hope you have a good day.